Hello, welcome to Estate Media on YouTube. This is a channel where you get updated of happenings across the globe. So make sure you subscribe so you get immediately notified when any information of interest pops up. What exactly is the information of interest? Well, Nigeria has actually been a boss with something that recently happened by US Senator in Texas. US Senator Ted Cruz actually introduced the Nigeria Religious Freedom Accountability Act of 2025. The bill seeks to protect Christians and other religious minorities being persecuted in Nigeria by holding accountable Nigerian officials who facilitate Islamist jihadist violence and the imposition of blasphemy laws. Now, this is what he said. I'm reading out his quote. Nigerian Christians are being targeted and executed for their faith by Islamist terrorist groups and are being forced to submit to sharia law and blasphemy laws across Nigeria. It is long past time to impose real cost on the Nigerian officials who facilitate these activities, and my Nigeria Religious Freedom Accountability Act uses new and existing tools to do exactly that. I urge my colleagues to advance this critical legislation expeditiously. End quote. Now, what exactly is the background? Religious persecution and violence against Christians and other religious minority in Nigeria is endemic, driven in significant part by Islamist jihadism and institutionalized sharia law in large parts of the country. Since 2009, over 52,000 Nigerian Christians have been murdered by jihadists, and over 20,000 Christian churches and religious-based institutions have been destroyed. On June 13, more than 200 Christians were murdered by Fulani jihadists school and in Nigerian village in Benue State. We all know that. We definitely know that. The Pope was even the first person who announced it in church while he was conducting service. But what happened? Okay, so it's long overdue, actually. And we're in Nigeria, so we know what is currently going on in the country. The spate of insecurity has gotten on the rise, and it's terrible. Now, let's take our minds back. In 2015, one of the campaign promises of the All Progressives Congress as a political party to take over the PDP is to ensure that they eradicate insecurity, meaning ending the spate of Boko Haram activities in Nigeria, resuscitating the Nigerian economy. Those were the triage through which the APC had promised that they would do something different from what the PDP rule has been on. In 2012, 2011, 2012, 2013, 2014, under former President Goodluck Ebele Jonathan, we saw the introduction of Boko Haram, although it did not start with Jonathan, though. It was way back during the presidency of General Olusegun Obasanjo. Obviously, you know what happened to Yusuf, who was supposedly the pioneer. But what happened in Jonathan's administration was that it got to a point, Boko Haram went to a school, abducted 214 schoolgirls. That was one of the downfall of the Jonathan administration. The APC obviously was a coalition, and they came together. They used the spate of insecurity and the onslaught of Boko Haram in the northern part of Nigeria to weaken the authenticity of Jonathan's government. It got so bad that it felicitated the support of the United States of America. This was what enabled the emergence of Muhammadu Buhari in 2015. Nigerians were tired of the insecurity. Nigerians were tired of the talk of economic downwind and downfall, and they wanted something new, something different. Now, the antecedent of former President Muhammadu Buhari as a military administrator, about him being tough on corruption, tough on a lot of maladministration policies, was what felicitated the interest of Nigerians to say, you know what, let's go with this man. He is not a corrupt man. He will ensure that there is fairness. When he was a military administrator, he was a president that took no nonsense. You remember his vice or deputy at the time was Idi Agon. And so they felt the no tolerance policy on corruption was definitely going to be good. And everyone supposedly wholeheartedly accepted Muhammadu Buhari as a presidential candidate for 2015 under the APC. Unfortunately, when the APC came on board as a political party in charge, it did not abate the spate of insecurity in the country. In fact, it got worse. We saw uprisings, jihadist movement to the extent that the administration of President Muhammadu Buhari had to seek for a resolution bringing in the whole Ruga policy. They felt like, okay, if states are able to give these people land so that they can carry on with their cattle business, it will reduce the spate of insecurity and the killings of these Fulani jihadists. But some states knew that one thing with these guys is that if they settle in your community, before you know, they want to take over the community. That is the fear. So a couple of states refused the Ruga policy and said they can set up ranches in the north. That is their base. That is their haven. So they should set up ranches in the north for them to go about their cattle business. They don't necessarily have to carry cattle all around the country just because of what? And using the opportunity to displace towns and community, take over people's farmlands, rename those communities to Fulani names or whatever. Well, this was, like I said, the premise of which Muhammadu Buhari came on board. And this was what he promised to eradicate Boko Haram activities and rout out insecurity. But it did not happen. It got worse, terribly worse. Unfortunately, President Bola Ahmed Tinubu now, who was the APC leader at the time, was mute when all of these things were going on. In fact, they kept quiet while Nigerians were complaining, Nigerians were angry, and Nigerians were not happy at the time. That was what even led to the NSAS, whereby police brutality. And when NSAS emerged, every Nigerian participated in the process. Only some northern states did not participate because Buhari is their brother. So the northerners did not participate in the NSAS protest. We all know how NSAS took place. Unfortunately, like I said, it did not abate insecurity. Now, President Bola Ahmed Tinubu came on board. His ticket was a Muslim ticket. The talk was Tinubu focuses on economy, Kashim Shettima focuses on security, and being the fact that he's from the north. Also, they felt that the Muslim ticket would placate a large majority of the north, being that you have a president who is practicing Islam and also from the south, and a vice president who is practicing Islam and is also from the north. That did not help matters at all. Insecurity is a thriving business. It has become so bad. These guys don't even care. Every nook and cranny, they are holding sway, rampaging communities, displacing people, killing them, raping women, pillaging their farmlands, destroying their farmlands, and renaming these communities to themselves. We saw what happened in Mangu local government, in Jos, Bokos, all of those communities, Benue, like that, in Borno state, in Adamawa state, in Niger state, in Zamfara state. These guys continue their mayhem. Now, it doesn't exclude the Southeast. The Southeast too was going through its own internal insecurity with certain unknown persons, unknown gunmen. Obviously, these are Sari Dokubo's men, and a lot of young persons have been killed and kidnapped. But the thing is, the kidnapping activities, the killings got so much to the extent that Boko Haram went to a military barracks and killed Nigerian army, young men, in a very terrible state. We've seen videos of them beheading some of the Nigerian soldiers and telling the Nigerian government there is nothing they can do. Unfortunately, the complacency, the anyhowness, and lackadaisical attitude of the government of the day actually made a lot of Nigerians to think that there is a collaboration between the government and insecurity, or the perpetrators of insecurity, because of how much they have kept quiet while these things continue. The latest state going through this uprising of insecurity and onslaught is Kwara State. And yet, no response, no adequate mechanism, no response from the government of the day. So, when Senator Ted Cruz said this, the Nigerian spokespersons, influencers, aides started reacting by saying this is an agenda. They want to turn the state of Nigeria to how they turned the state of Libya. They want insecurity in Nigeria. They want religious war in Nigeria so that they can make Nigeria to become an ex-state where, before you know, they will say we don't have any working country, or the federal government of Nigeria is not active at all because a jihadist movement has taken over the day. Now, immediately, influencers went on social media. Aide of former President Muhammadu Buhari went on social media to start responding by saying, no, there is no persecution of Christians in Nigeria. Christians are not being killed. Nothing is happening to Christians. The killings is across. They're not looking at your religion or tribe. They're doing what they're doing to everyone. But the funny thing is, no one knew that these guys could be this active in responding, because people have been killed and kidnapped on a daily basis, and we don't get to hear any reaction from the government. No reaction from the spokespersons of the government, no reaction from the Nigerian military, no reaction at all until what Senator Ted Cruz did. And he was not the only senator. Other senators too started tweeting it. Now, this is what happened. When Kashim Shettima went to the United Nations General Assembly, he actually called for peace in Palestine and saying that the state of Palestine should be recognized. And it wasn't a few days or a week or 2 weeks after that this whole thing happened. Now, the speculation is that the state of Israel was not happy with what the Nigerian vice president did. And so, a way of getting back and turning the state into another uprising of Islamist terrorist activities is by calling it a bad name and by saying that Christians in Nigeria are being persecuted. The truth is this: most of the communities in the north are Christian dominated communities. Whether you like it or not, it is actually the truth. We saw what happened with Deborah, right? Of obviously another woman as well, who they said made a statement against Allah that they considered to be quite blasphemous. The next thing, they took her and burnt her. It's not the first time we've seen these guys act very radical against Christians who may have said one thing or the other unknowingly against, Unfortunately, this is what it is. But this insecurity is everywhere, actually, regardless of religion or tribe. It has been so terrible. It feels like there is a deliberate means of exterminating people for a certain religion to be in charge and for territories and communities to be taken over by them. So Nigerians are now asking, why is President Bola Ahmed Tinubu quiet? Is there a collaboration between the government of the day and these guys? Now, guess what? The Niger military commander recently told us that he will soon mention the names of the sponsors of the sponsors of Boko Haram activities in Nigeria and ISWAP activities in Nigeria. He said they are top politicians in Nigeria, very well known. In fact, some names they actually mentioned. So, why is it that Nigerian southern influencers are all of a sudden saying, no, that's not what it is? Bayo Onanuga came out to speak to Senator Ted Cruz to focus on his country and not focus on Nigeria. Let me take you back memory lane. If you remember, very recently in March, a bishop from Nigeria's Middle Belt denounced the mass killing of Christians. According to him, his name is Bishop Wilfred Anegbe of Makurdi. He visited the UK as a guest of aid to the church in need, together with diocesan pastoral worker Father Remigius Ilya. They told Westminster parliamentarians that militants in very recent operation had touched the people's homes and forced them to flee to internal displacement persons camps. Now, the bishop said that Islamist extremists and Fulani headsmen had targeted Christians in Makurdi and elsewhere in Benue State. Farmers driven from their land, churches burned, priests, religious, and lay members killed. And this was when he spoke at an event chaired by leading human rights champion Lord Alton of Liverpool. Bishop Anagbe said the militant Fulani headsmen bear on defenseless villagers without consequence. They follow orders to conquer, kill, and occupy. They attack even those who have managed to escape into the IDP camps. He added that for his people, their experience can be summed up as that of a church under Islamist extermination. In the same vein, President Bola Ahmed Tinubu, in that same March, was receiving Catholic bishops in Aso Rock. He received a delegation of Catholic bishops of Nigeria at the presidential villa in Abuja. He welcomed the clerics and assured them of his government's dedication to a greater Nigeria. There were bishops there. Bishop Matthew Kuka, John Cardinal Onaiko, Bishop Emeritus of Abuja Archdiocese, and a couple of other Catholic bishops, including Bishop of Owerri Archdiocese, Lucius Iwejuru Ugoji. There were quite a number of them. So this is where it actually gets interesting. Bishop Matthew Kuka was actually given an appointment in that particular vein. So if you don't know that, Bishop Matthew Kuka was appointed by President Bola Ahmed Tinubu as Pro-Chancellor of Federal University of Applied Sciences in Kachia in Kaduna State. But here is actually what is quite funny. Do you remember that during the Jonathan administration, when the onslaught of Boko Haram was going on, Bishop Matthew Kuka, Cardinal John Onaiko, Pastor Adeboye, and a couple of other clerics as well as pastors of different denominations were part of a protest calling out the government of the day and telling them to make sure that they rout out insecurity and stop the killing of Christians in Nigeria. So Nigerians are now asking, where are all these religious leaders? Where are the Christian pastors? Where are the clerics in the Christendom who were very vocal at the time of Jonathan? Where are they now in the current state of insecurity in the country? Pastor Tunde Bakare, everyone is calling their names. Why are you guys quiet now? You were vocal. You were penchant. You were very, very vituperous in the administration of former President Goodluck Ebele Jonathan, and then all of a sudden you're quiet. Well, You know that the APC chairman, Nentenwa Yodata, his mother passed on, and the president went to visit him. In that gathering, the president said we should not hate ourselves. He's a Muslim, his wife is a Christian and also a pastor, and she prays for him. That there is no hatred between Christians and Muslims, and so we should embrace peace. That's what he said. Now, there were a couple of Christian leaders there, along with the Plateau State Governor Kilek Moftwang and a couple of other governors as well, who was with the president when he came to felicitate with the ABC chairman because the mother passed on. Now, a couple of Nigerians think that money will exchange hands, and then these Christians will start coming out to boldly berate the Western media and the Western counterparts that there is no Christian killing in Nigeria. It's a way of silencing that. A couple of people think that this is what the APC did against Jonathan in 2015 before they came into power, and it's the same thing that the West is doing to President Bola Ahmed Tinubu. I don't know if the conspiracy theory is true, but the question is, all this while, Nigerians have been tweeting and calling on the United Nations about the state of insecurity in the country and the government's complacent and lackadaisical attitude in handling this. They've been quiet. So what happened that all of a sudden Senator Ted Cruz decided to remember Nigeria in their Senate and call for this kind of sanctions? Senator Ted Cruz is calling for sanctions on political leaders in Nigeria from entering the United States. He feels they're complacent, they've been quiet with the spate of killings going on in Nigeria. Is this politically motivated, or is this genuine interest by the United Nations in helping the persecuted Christians in Nigeria? Is that something that we do not know? But the funny thing is that ever since this thing happened, all of the politicians who have been quiet in the spate of insecurity, the ravaging situation of Boko Haram, kidnapping, banditry, and all whatnot, have now had voices. They have been talking. Senator Godswill Akpabio, the president himself, Bayo Onanaga, Garba Ahmed Garba, the former aide to former President Muhammadu Buhari, he has been tweeting and calling on his Christian counterparts to please tweet and say no, Nigerian Christians are not being persecuted. This insecurity is affecting everyone, regardless of your religion, regardless of your ethnicity. It's quite funny, don't you think so, that it took Senator Ted Cruz to awake the voices or resonate the voices of those politicians who have been mute while Nigerians have been dying, being killed in their homes, in their farmlands. They see the videos of their cries, they see everything, and yet they keep mum. So all of a sudden, their voices have a reason. Others think that this is an agenda. Maybe there is something they want President Bola Ahmed Tinubu to do that he's not doing. And so this is a way of blackmailing his government of the day to succumb, or otherwise you create uprising in Nigeria. And in 2027, he will not say it. Well, as it stands, the president really has a lot of support base because a lot of them have been speaking on his behalf and saying Nigeria is not going through insecurity. Western government, mind your business, focus on yourself. When we ask you for assistance, you don't give us assistance, and all of a sudden you realize that Nigerian Christians are being persecuted. Put two and two together. Make do of what this information is to you. My name is Esther Wachiko. I'd like to know what you think in the comment section. Bye for now.